My stepmother slammed her hand on the table, silencing the entire dinner party. "After everything I've done for you, this is how you repay us?" she bellowed, her eyes burning with rage. The reason for her fury wasn't a dark secret or a terrible lie. It was the simple fact that I'd asked my best friend, not my stepsister, to be my maid of honor. I stood frozen, my hand hovering over a glass of water, the condensation cold against my trembling fingertips. The half-eaten slice of lemon tart on my plate, once a bright promise of sweetness, now looked like a jaundiced, mocking eye. Her hand, adorned with the gaudy diamond my father had given her, swept through the air, a gesture of grand, theatrical betrayal. It pointed a trembling finger directly at me. "It is a slap in the face, Emma. Do you hear me? A deliberate, calculated, and exquisitely cruel act of selfishness. You did this to hurt her." Her gesture shifted, indicating the far corner of the room where my stepsister, Chloe, was artfully collapsing into an armchair. Chloe, a master of manipulated sorrow, had her face buried in her hands, her narrow shoulders shaking with what were meant to be heartbroken sobs. They were perfectly timed, rising in volume whenever Laura paused for breath. My gaze darted desperately to my father. He was my last hope, the final bastion of reason. But he sat cemented to his chair, a man turned to stone. His eyes, the same blue as my own, were fixed on the deep red swirl of Cabernet in his glass, as if it held the answers to the universe. He was a portrait of pathetic, gutless silence, a captain abandoning his ship in the middle of a hurricane of his own making. Around the polished mahogany table, the rest of the family, my well-meaning but conflict-averse aunt, my uncle who was already looking at his watch, their two bewildered teenage children, sat in suspended animation. Forks hung in mid-air. Expressions were a mixture of shock and a desperate desire to be anywhere else. "You always resented her," Laura continued, her voice gaining strength as she fed on the tension. "You resented her for having a mother. You resented her for fitting in. You couldn't bear to see her have one moment of happiness, one special role in your life. So you took it from her. You gave the most important honor to a stranger, an outsider, just to spite your sister. A stranger." She called Sarah, the girl who held my hand through every scraped knee and every broken heart, a stranger. The injustice of it was a physical blow. But to understand the bitter, metallic taste of my stepmother's words, to comprehend the years of pressure behind my father's silence and the calculated nature of my stepsister's tears, we have to go back. Not just to the engagement, but to the very beginning, to the moment my world cracked in two. My first world was a small, sun-drenched kingdom ruled by a triumvirate of love. There was my father, a man whose laugh was like rumbling thunder and whose arms were a fortress. There was me, his adoring and slightly feral princess. And there was my mother, the sun itself. She was the warmth, the light, the gravity that held our tiny universe together. She smelled of lavender and brownie batter, and she had a habit of tucking wildflowers into my hair. Our house wasn't large, but she made it a castle, a library, a bakery, a place where creativity and kindness were the highest laws of the land. One of my most vivid memories is of an afternoon when I was 7. I had decided to redecorate the living room wall with a mural of a purple dragon, using a permanent marker I had liberated from my father's desk. When my mother found me, I braced for the inevitable explosion. Instead, she just looked at the wall, then at me, her face a mask of seriousness. She knelt down, took the marker from my hand, and carefully drew a knight in shining armor facing the dragon. "Every dragon needs a hero," she whispered, as if sharing the most profound secret. We spent the next hour adding a castle and a forest. My father came home and stared at the wall in stunned silence, but my mother just laughed and declared it a masterpiece. The wall stayed that way for a year, a monument to her unconventional, all-encompassing love. Her illness was a thief in the night. It came without warning and stole her from us with brutal efficiency. The sun in our kingdom went out. The silence she left behind was a hollow, echoing thing. For 4 years, my father and I navigated the gray landscape of our grief together. We became a unit of two, a silent pact of survival. We ate frozen dinners, forgot to dust, and spoke of her in hushed, reverent tones. He would read to me at night, his voice thick with unshed tears, and I would pretend to be asleep so he wouldn't have to see mine. We were shipwrecked, clinging to the same piece of driftwood, and in our shared loss, our bond felt unbreakable. Then, when I was 12, he told me he had met someone. Her name was Laura. He spoke of her with a light in his eyes I hadn't seen since before the illness, a desperate, hopeful glow that I immediately resented. He was finding a new son, and it felt like a betrayal of the one we had lost. Laura arrived for dinner one Friday night, a whirlwind of expensive perfume and sharp, assessing glances. She brought with her a daughter, Chloe, a pale, quiet girl, a year younger than me, who clung to her mother's side. Laura surveyed our home, her lips pursed in a thin line. I saw her eyes linger on the faint outline of the dragon mural my father had eventually painted over. It felt as though she was seeing not just a messy house, but a life she was here to correct and erase. "It's so lovely to finally meet you, Emma," she said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Your father has told me so much about you." Chloe offered a shy, mumbled "hi." I said nothing, just stared at them from the doorway, a ghost in my own home. My father, desperate for this to work, filled the silence with nervous chatter. He was trying to glue the pieces of his life back together, but he was using the wrong people. He was trying to build a new family on the foundations of my old one, and I could feel the ground beneath my feet beginning to crumble. The colonization of my life was a gradual but relentless process. Laura, with the quiet efficiency of an ivy vine, began to reshape our home in her image. My mother's worn, comfortable armchair was replaced by a stiff, modern monstrosity. The colorful, chaotic kitchen was streamlined into a sterile, white laboratory where cooking felt like a science experiment rather than an act of love. The favoritism towards Chloe was just as insidious. It wasn't a blatant, cartoonish evil. It was 1,000 tiny cuts, a slow, steady erosion of my place in the family. Laura enrolled us both in piano lessons. Chloe, who had nimble fingers and a natural ear, excelled quickly. I struggled, my hands clumsy, and my heart not in it. Laura would sit through Chloe's practice sessions, offering praise and encouragement. My sessions were met with sighs and comments like, "Well, not everyone can be a musician, dear. Perhaps you should focus on your studies." The ultimate example came on my 14th birthday. My one request was a small party with a few friends, including Sarah, and a specific type of chocolate cake from a local bakery my mother and I had loved. Laura agreed, but with a suggestion. Chloe's birthday was only 3 weeks away. Wouldn't it be more efficient to have a joint celebration? Before I could protest, my father had chimed in, saying what a wonderful, inclusive idea it was. The party was a Chloe-centric affair. The decorations were in her favorite color, pastel pink. The music was a playlist of her favorite pop bands. My friends huddled awkwardly in one corner, while Chloe's much larger group dominated the living room. When the cake came out, it wasn't the rich chocolate I had dreamed of, but a vanilla sponge with pink frosting. Laura beamed, announcing, "We decided to go with something a little more sophisticated." I saw the brief, triumphant smirk Chloe shot me over the flickering candles. I spent the rest of my own birthday hiding in my room, the bitter taste of vanilla and disappointment in my mouth. It was Sarah who found me. She didn't offer platitudes. She just sat on the bed next to me, handed me a small, clumsily wrapped gift, and said, "Your stepmother is a piece of work." Inside the box was a single, perfect cupcake from the bakery I'd wanted, a tiny chocolate beacon in the darkness. In that moment, my allegiance was sealed. My family was a place of obligation and alienation. Sarah was home. Her chaotic, noisy house, with its ever-present dog hair and the smell of her mom's questionable cooking experiments, became my true sanctuary. We spent hours in her attic room, dissecting the injustices of my home life, planning our futures, and forging a bond that was thicker than any blood tie. As we navigated high school, the chasm between my home life and my real life widened. At school, I was confident, a member of the debate team, with a solid group of friends anchored by Sarah. At home, I was a ghost, drifting through rooms where Laura and Chloe's lives took center stage. I remember one evening vividly. I had won a regional debate tournament, a significant achievement I was quietly proud of. I came home, clutching the small trophy, my heart thumping with a foolish hope for recognition. I found Laura and my father in the kitchen, cooing over a finger painting Chloe had made in art class. "Oh, Emma, there you are," Laura said, barely glancing up. "Chloe made the most expressive piece today. Her teacher says she has real raw talent." My father, finally noticing the trophy in my hand, said, "Oh, what's that?" "I won the debate tournament today," I mumbled. "Oh, that's great, sweetie. That's really great," he said, his attention already drifting back to the splotch of color on the fridge. The trophy felt heavy and stupid in my hand. I quietly went to my room and put it in the back of my closet. It wasn't about the trophy. It was about the complete and utter invisibility. They didn't see me. They saw a placeholder, a relic from a previous life they were patiently waiting to fade away. Meeting Jake felt like stepping out of a fog into the clear, bright sun. We met in a university literature class, arguing over the merits of Fitzgerald. He was smart, funny, and he looked at me, really looked at me when I spoke. He listened. It was a novel and intoxicating experience. On one of our early dates, a long walk through a city park, I found myself, much to my own surprise, telling him about my family. I didn't mean to. It just tumbled out. The subtle put-downs, the constant feeling of being second best, my father's frustrating passivity. I braced myself for the usual reaction, a polite but uncomfortable silence, or worse, the suggestion that I was probably being too sensitive. Jake just stopped walking, turned to me, and took my hand. "That sounds incredibly hard," he said, his brow furrowed with genuine empathy. "For what it's worth, you don't seem like a placeholder to me. You seem like the main event." I nearly burst into tears right there on the path. He didn't try to fix it. He didn't dismiss it. He just validated it. With him, I felt my tense shoulders begin to relax for the first time in years. He was my safe harbor, the place I could be my unedited self. He loved the quiet parts of me that my family found awkward and the passionate parts they found inconvenient. He proposed 2 years later, on the anniversary of that first walk. It was a cool autumn evening, the air crisp with the smell of rain and dying leaves. We were retracing our steps through the same park, which was now nearly deserted under the dim, hazy glow of the old-fashioned lamps. There was no grand gesture, no hidden photographer. He just stopped in the middle of the path, his hands trembling slightly, and told me that every day with me felt like coming home. He got down on one knee, the damp leaves sticking to his jeans, and opened a small, worn velvet box. My yes was a breathless whisper. He slid the simple, elegant ring onto my finger, and it felt like the final piece of a puzzle I didn't even know I was solving. The first thing I did was pull out my phone, my hands shaking so much I could barely dial. "You are not going to believe this," I whispered into the phone when Sarah answered. Her shriek was so loud I had to pull the receiver away from my ear. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated joy. We screamed and laughed and cried for 10 minutes, making incoherent plans for the future, our shared history culminating in this perfect moment. Telling my family the next evening was a study in contrasts. I showed them the ring, my heart still fluttering with excitement. "Oh, how lovely," Laura said, examining the ring with a critical eye. "Very simple." Chloe offered a tight-lipped, "Wow, congratulations." My father hugged me, a brief, slightly awkward embrace. "Well, this is big news. Jake's a good man, Emma. We're happy for you." His words were right, but the tone was flat, like a line read from a script. The joy I had felt began to seep away, replaced by the familiar chill of their lukewarm approval. The difference was staggering. Sarah's reaction had been a supernova of happiness for me. Theirs felt like a polite acknowledgement of a moderately interesting event, like a neighbor announcing they were getting a new car. The question of my maid of honor should have been simple, but my family dynamic made it a minefield. For weeks, I agonized over it. My head and my heart were at war. My head, conditioned by years of trying to keep the peace, presented a logical, albeit depressing, argument. Choose Chloe. It's the path of least resistance. It will make Laura happy, which will make Dad happy, which will make your life easier. It's a symbolic gesture of unity. It's what a good stepsister would do. The thought of it made my stomach clench. It felt like a lie. It was a performance, another role I would have to play in the long-running production of the happy blended family. My heart, however, had a much simpler, more powerful argument. Sarah. I sat one night with a journal, trying to make a list. Under Chloe's name, I wrote, stepsister, family obligation, might make Laura less hostile. I stared at the meager list. I tried to think of a single time Chloe had stood up for me, a single time she had offered genuine, unsolicited support. I came up blank. I could, however, easily list the times she had been complicit in Laura's slights, the smirk at the birthday party, the time she forgot to tell me Laura had changed the time of a family dinner, causing me to show up an hour late to a table of disapproving faces, her convenient deafness whenever Laura made a cutting remark at my expense. Under Sarah's name, the words flowed. My rock, my sister in all but blood, knows me better than anyone, held my hair back when I got food poisoning in college, drove 3 hours in a snowstorm to be with me after a bad breakup, celebrates my successes like they're her own, the only person I can be completely, utterly myself with. Reading the two lists side by side, the choice was so glaringly obvious it was almost laughable. To choose Chloe would be the ultimate act of self-betrayal. It would be an insult to the profound, life-sustaining friendship I had with Sarah. My wedding day was supposed to be the one day that was truly about me and Jake, about authentic love and genuine connection. I couldn't start my marriage with a lie standing right next to me at the altar. I decided to tell Chloe first, to soften the blow. I took her to a quiet coffee shop, determined to handle it with grace and kindness. So, I've been thinking a lot about my bridal party, I began, my hands wrapped around a warm mug. And I've made a decision about my maid of honor. I saw a flicker of something in her eyes, a calculated hope. I'm going to ask Sarah, I said gently. You and I both know the history she and I have. We've been like sisters since we were kids, and it just feels like the right thing for me. But it would mean the world to me if you would be a bridesmaid. I held my breath. Chloe arranged her face into a mask of perfect understanding. She even managed a small, convincing smile. Oh, Emma, of course, she said, her voice smooth as silk. I totally get it. You and Sarah have always been so close. I'd be honored to be a bridesmaid. Honestly, don't even worry about it. Relief washed over me, so potent it made me dizzy. Thank you, Chloe, I said, my gratitude immense. That means so much to me. I was a fool. I had mistaken a well-rehearsed performance for genuine understanding. I had handed her the exact ammunition her mother needed to launch a war. The cold front from Laura moved in almost immediately. It wasn't a dramatic storm, but a slow, creeping frost that chilled every interaction. The passive aggression became her primary language. The first major battle was over the wedding dress. I had invited Laura and Chloe to come with me, Sarah, and my aunt. It was meant to be a gesture of inclusion. It was a mistake. I came out of the dressing room in the first dress, a simple A-line with delicate lace sleeves. I loved it. It felt like me. Sarah gasped. Em, that's stunning. It's so you. Laura tilted her head. It's nice, she said, drawing out the word until it meant its opposite. A bit plain, perhaps. Chloe, darling, what do you think? Chloe, who was pretending to look at bridesmaid dresses, chimed in. The lace is pretty. I just feel like you could handle something with more drama, you know? I tried on another, this one a sleek, modern sheath. It's certainly very form-fitting, Laura commented, her eyes scanning my figure with disapproval. It leaves very little to the imagination. This went on for 5 more dresses. Whatever I liked, Laura found a subtle way to criticize it. Finally, exasperated, the consultant brought out a massive ball gown, dripping with sequins and beading. It was the antithesis of my style. I put it on just to end the appointment. When I emerged, Laura's face lit up. Now that is a wedding dress, she exclaimed. So glamorous. Chloe, isn't that just what you were talking about? A dress with presents? It's amazing, Chloe gushed. I stood there, drowning in a sea of tulle and sequins, feeling like a child playing dress-up in someone else's clothes. Sarah shot me a look of pure sympathy over Laura's head. In that moment, I knew I would have to come back alone with Sarah to actually find my dress. I left the salon feeling defeated and emotionally drained. The tension escalated during every stage of planning. When Jake and I chose a rustic, charming barn as our venue, Laura remarked, "I hope you're planning on getting a tetanus shot. I'd have pictured something more elegant for you, like the ballroom at the country club, where Chloe had her sweet 16. I tried to involve Chloe, asking for her opinion on floral arrangements. I showed her two options, a loose, rustic bouquet of wildflowers and a more traditional, structured bouquet of roses. "I love the wildflowers," I said. "They're okay," she said with a shrug. "A bit messy, maybe? The roses are more classic, more bridal." Laura, of course, agreed. I felt like I was going crazy, constantly second-guessing my own taste. I tried to talk to my father one evening, hoping for an ally. "Dad, Laura seems upset about all my wedding choices," I said, trying to keep my voice even. He sighed, not looking up from his newspaper. "Emma, you know how she is. She just wants to be involved. Wedding planning is stressful. Just try to meet her halfway. For my sake, can you just try to keep the peace?" Keep the peace. It was the mantra of my childhood. It meant, your feelings are secondary. Your desires are an inconvenience. Accommodate, acquiesce, and disappear. The conversation left me feeling more alone than ever. I was planning the most important day of my life, and I was being told to sublimate my own identity to appease the woman who had spent a decade trying to erase it. The emotional toll was immense. I was exhausted, anxious, and the joy of my engagement was being systematically drained away, replaced by a constant, low-grade dread. The night of the family dinner, the air was already thick with unspoken grievances before we even sat down. Laura had insisted on hosting it, a proper celebration for Jake and me. It felt more like a summons. The dinner conversation was painfully stilted. My aunt and uncle asked Jake polite questions about his job. My cousins stared at their phones. My father talked about the weather. Laura was a portrait of simmering rage, her smile as thin and brittle as spun sugar. She kept refilling Chloe's glass of water, patting her hand, and shooting me looks of pure venom over the rim of her wine glass. The explosion came, as I knew it would, over dessert. Laura put her fork down with a sharp, definitive click that made everyone at the table jump. "So, Emma," she began, her voice dangerously sweet, "I hear you've made your choice for your bridal party. Chloe told me. This was it, the main event." "Yes, I have," I said, my voice barely a whisper. I could feel Jake's hand find mine under the table, his grip firm and steady. And then, the dam broke. Laura launched into the tirade I had been subconsciously dreading for months, but it was worse than I could have ever imagined. It was the speech that had her slamming the table, the one that froze me in my chair, that brought Chloe's fake tears, that turned my father to stone. She didn't just accuse me of selfishness. She twisted my history, reframing my quietness as sullenness, my independence as rejection. She painted a picture of herself as a long-suffering saint who had tried her best to love an unlovable, resentful child. She claimed I had excluded Chloe not just out of spite, but as the culmination of a decade-long campaign of hostility. "You have a cold heart, Emma," she finished, her voice shaking with self-righteous fury. "And you have deeply, deeply wounded a sister who has only ever wanted your love." The silence that followed was absolute. No one moved, no one breathed. I looked around the table at the shocked faces, the downcast eyes. I had been publicly tried and convicted, and my own father had sat by and watched it happen. The pain of it was a physical thing, a crushing weight on my chest. I pushed my chair back, the legs scraping loudly against the hardwood floor, and fled the room without a word. I didn't stop until I reached the familiar sanctuary of my old childhood bedroom. I shut the door and leaned against it, my body trembling. The room was a time capsule, with its faded floral wallpaper my mother had chosen, and the bookshelf filled with the dog-eared paperbacks of my youth. It was the only room in the house Laura hadn't touched. I sank onto the edge of the bed, the mattress sighing under my weight. A few minutes later, there was a soft knock. "Em?" It was Jake. He came in, followed closely by Sarah, who must have been called for emergency backup. Their faces were etched with concern. Sarah didn't say a word. She just crossed the room in 3 strides and wrapped me in a fierce, protective hug. I buried my face in her shoulder and finally let the tears come. Silent, hot tears of rage and humiliation. Jake knelt in front of me, taking both of my hands in his. "Hey, look at me," he said, his voice soft but firm. I lifted my tear-streaked face. "You did nothing wrong. Do you hear me?" "Nothing." "She hates me," I whispered, the words tasting like poison. "No," Sarah said, pulling back but keeping her hands on my shoulders. "She doesn't hate you, Em. She's threatened by you. She has been since day one. You're your mother's daughter, you have your father's original love, and you've built a life and a happiness for yourself that she has no control over. That drives her insane." "Your dad," Jake started, then shook his head in frustration. "I don't understand him, but that's his weakness, not your fault." "He just sat there," I said, the memory a fresh stab of pain. "I know," Sarah said, her voice full of a shared history of disappointment. "He always does. But tonight isn't about him or her or Chloe's crocodile tears. Tonight is about them showing their true colors. They just handed you a gift, Em. The gift of no longer having to pretend." Jake squeezed my hands. "This wedding is about you and me starting our life together. The people who stand up there with us should be the people who have stood by you your entire life. You chose the right person. You chose your real sister." He nodded toward Sarah, who gave me a watery smile. Their words were a balm on a raw wound. They weren't just offering comfort, they were offering truth. They were reflecting back to me the reality I had been forced to question. I wasn't the cruel, selfish person Laura had described. I was a woman who had finally chosen to honor a real, life-affirming bond over a toxic, obligatory one. Curled up on my childhood bed, with my future husband on his knees before me and my truest friend by my side, I felt the first stirrings of a new resolve. The hurt was still there, but beneath it, something stronger was beginning to grow. I slept fitfully, the angry words from the dinner party echoing in my dreams. But when I woke, the hurt had receded, replaced by a cold, clear certainty. The years of trying to be smaller, quieter, and more accommodating were over. The performance was finished. I found Laura in the kitchen, staring into a cup of coffee as if it held the secrets to her martyrdom. She looked up as I entered, her face settling into an expression of wounded pride. My father was already gone, having escaped to the golf course, his preferred method of conflict avoidance. I didn't wait for her to speak. My voice, when it came, was calm and even, devoid of the emotion that had choked me the night before. "Laura, we need to talk about last night," she bristled. "I don't think there's anything more to say. I said what needed to be said." "You said what you felt," I corrected her gently. "But it was not the truth. And you will not speak to me like that again. Not in public, not in private, ever." She looked genuinely shocked, as if the furniture had started talking back to her. "How dare you?" "No," I said, holding up a hand. It wasn't trembling. "I'm not here to argue. I'm here to be clear. My choice of Maid of Honor was not a reflection on Chloe. It was a reflection on Sarah. It was about my history, my friendship, and my happiness. I am sorry that it hurt your feelings and Chloe's feelings, but I am not sorry for the decision itself." I took a breath. For years, I have felt like an outsider in this house. I have felt that my accomplishments were minimized and my feelings were dismissed in favor of Chloe's. Last night, you publicly accused me of being a hateful person to my entire family. That was profoundly unfair and incredibly hurtful. I am your stepdaughter, and I am the daughter of the man you married. I deserve your respect, even when you disagree with me. I had never spoken to her like this. I had never stood my ground. Her face was a mixture of disbelief and fury. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. For the first time, she seemed to be at a loss for words. "My wedding will be a day of joy and honesty," I continued. "Jake and I would love for you, Dad, and Chloe to be there to share it with us. But the drama ends now. This is the boundary. You can choose to respect it or you can choose not to. The choice is yours. I didn't wait for a response. I didn't need her apology or her understanding. I needed to say it for myself. I turned and walked out of the kitchen, my head held high. I felt a lightness in my chest I hadn't experienced in 15 years. It was the feeling of liberation. Our wedding day dawned bright and clear, a perfect, cloudless blue. The frantic energy of planning had given way to a serene, joyful calm. The barn venue, which Laura had scoffed at, was transformed. Twinkling fairy lights were strung from the rafters, and long wooden tables were adorned with simple jars of wildflowers, just as I'd wanted. The hours before the ceremony were filled with the easy, bubbling happiness I had craved. Sarah, my aunt, and I got ready in a small bridal suite, the room filled with laughter and the scent of hairspray. Sarah was a whirlwind of calm efficiency, steaming my dress, making sure I ate something, and whispering jokes in my ear every time she sensed a flicker of nerves. As she zipped up my dress, the simple, elegant one I had bought with her on a secret second shopping trip, we met each other's eyes in the mirror. "You look beautiful, Em," she said, her own eyes shining with tears. "Your mom would be so proud." The words were a gut punch of pure love. "She would have loved you," I whispered back, and we held each other for a long moment, a silent acknowledgement of our long journey. As I walked down the aisle on my father's arm, I saw the faces of my guests, my friends, Jake's family, all beaming, and then I saw them. Laura, my father, and Chloe, sitting in the front row. Chloe was in the pale lilac bridesmaid dress I had chosen. She offered a small, tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. Laura's face was a mask of neutrality, impossible to read, her gaze fixed somewhere over my head. My father looked at me, his eyes full of a complicated mixture of pride and regret. It wasn't the warm, unified family front I might have once dreamed of, but it was honest. The boundary was there, visible and respected. But as soon as I saw Jake waiting for me at the end of the aisle, his face breaking into a radiant smile, they all faded into the background. The rest of the world dissolved. The ceremony was a blur of deeply felt promises and easy laughter. At the reception, the atmosphere was one of pure celebration. Sarah's Maid of Honor speech was a masterpiece. She spoke of our shared history, of birthday cupcakes and high school drama, of supporting each other through grief and celebrating every joy. "Emma has taught me what true loyalty is," she concluded, raising her glass. And seeing her with Jake, a man who sees and cherishes every wonderful thing about her, is one of the greatest joys of my life. To the bride and groom, the entire room erupted in cheers. Later, Chloe approached me by the cake table. "The wedding is beautiful, Emma," she said, her voice quiet. "Congratulations." "Thank you for being here, Chloe," I said, and for the first time it felt like a simple truth, not an obligation. There was no warmth, but there was a truce. A cool, distant peace. It was enough. Laura watched from afar, a solitary figure by the barn door. She never approached me directly, but I felt her eyes on me throughout the night. Her expression was no longer angry, but something more complex, conflicted. Perhaps, in the face of so much genuine joy that she had no part in creating, she was finally seeing the limits of her control. A week later, sitting on a sun-drenched balcony overlooking the ocean, with Jake's arm around me and the wedding ring feeling solid and real on my finger, I finally had time to reflect. My internal monologue, which had been a cacophony of anxiety and doubt for so long, was finally quiet. I had spent so much of my life craving a specific type of family, a picture-perfect ideal that I thought would heal the wound my mother's death had left. I had contorted myself into knots, trying to earn a love and acceptance that was never truly on offer. The fight over my maid of honor had been the painful, necessary catalyst that forced me to see the truth. Family, I realized, isn't about obligation. It isn't about keeping a fragile peace at the cost of your own soul. True family are the people who show up. They are the ones who bring you a cupcake when your heart is broken. They are the ones who listen to your fears and don't tell you you're being sensitive. They are the ones who stand beside you, not because they have to, but because your happiness is their own. My relationship with my father, Laura, and Chloe wasn't fixed. There was no storybook ending where we all hugged and learned a valuable lesson. It was fractured, and perhaps it always would be. There was a new distance between us, a space cleared by the painful setting of boundaries. But in that space, I had found room to breathe. I had found my own voice. I felt a profound sense of peace, a quiet strength that came from knowing I had been true to myself. I had chosen love over obligation, authenticity over performance. I had fought a quiet, painful war for my own happiness, and I had won. I looked at Jake, my husband, my family, and I knew I was finally home.